What if a dress could capture the entire galaxy and walk the red carpet? This cosmic creation was inspired by Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and designed for actress Sarah Dean to wear at the Hollywood premiere. You're about to watch 100 hours of construction, but here's a twist. This dress has a secret feature built into it. See if you can guess what it is before the end. My name is Ryan Jude Noveline, and I'm an artist who loves to make dresses and share them with you. Let's get started. There are different ways that you can start about doing a dress like this. You can drape a pattern directly onto the form, or you can draft it directly onto paper using math or tracing over an existing pattern. I decided to go onto Etsy and look for an existing pattern that was similar to the type of fit that I was looking for. There are so many incredible patterns from different pattern makers and fashion designers that are already available on Etsy, so there's a really good chance that you can find something pretty similar to what you're looking for. For this particular gown, I was looking for something like a formal fitted jacket that I would be able to extend into a skirt, and I found a fitted kind of jacket with a peplum skirt attached to it, something like that. So essentially I was doing some alterations to the pattern to combine the pieces and change the collar to wrap around the back of the neck and have it be attached in a slightly more formal looking way. The nice thing about working with an existing professional pattern is that you already know that the math of the pieces is going to line up. If you do it yourself and you do it from scratch, of course you completely can. It's just that you have to double, triple, quadruple check all of your math the entire time to make sure everything's going to line up. So there's a little bit of a peace of mind working with something that's already pre-made. Even though I knew the math of the pattern was going to work on the form in terms of the sizing being correct, I was curious to see how the alterations that I did to the pattern were actually going to look when it was sewn together. So I did do one simple mock-up of just the main pieces of the torso to test the style and see if I liked how it was going to work. As much as I love the sparkle of sequins, after every project I've used sequins, I tell myself, never again, because those little pieces of plastic get absolutely everywhere, and the sequins on this particular fabric were extra small, so they were even more glitter-like. The instructions for this pattern required using interfacing to wrap inside all of the sections that touch the torso. Basically the entire jacket except the sleeves. I wasn't sure if that was going to work for the dress that I was making. I was worried that it might end up being a little bit too stiff. And really the only way to know that is to mock it up, test it out, put it on the form, see how it looks. Even though I knew I wanted an angular and dramatic silhouette, I didn't necessarily think that I wanted the midsection to look or appear stiff in any way. I was hoping that it was gonna, kind of hug her in a very attractive, semi-fitted kind of way. But I also added an extreme plunging neckline, so I didn't know exactly how that was gonna alter the fit too. And then as soon as I put it on the form and started to tug it, I immediately knew that that was absolutely not what I wanted. So that was good. That was all I needed to know to essentially move from this onto the final fabric. And I changed direction on where exactly I put the interfacing. I can tell you with certainty that Fashion Week in New York does not run on Dunkin'. I was a fashion intern during my college years, and I worked in an atelier in Midtown. And one of the things that struck me that I thought was just so cool to observe in action was seeing the experienced fabric cutters cutting all of these exquisite and expensive materials in the most precise ways with, different pairs of scissors and different blades. And when they would lift off the pattern, it would reveal just the most beautifully curved imprint of that paper pattern. And that was just this incredible art form in itself, that's someone's entire job to do that well. I was being particularly careful with this cobalt blue crepe fabric that I was using to line the sequins and ensure that the print appeared solid. I picked that fabric because it was mostly solid and very lightweight, so the combination of the sequins and the crepe was very similar to the type of heftier fabric that you would use for a jacket. I think probably the hardest thing to learn as a fashion designer is truly understanding fabric weight and which fabrics to pair together appropriately, and how many layers of a certain fabric material are appropriate, because you can't see that in a picture and you can't really read about that in a book. The only way that you can do that is you have to handle fabric and you have to play with it and experiment with it, and you learn what works, what doesn't work, and sometimes maybe just something that works really well for you that you want to repeat and make more of a signature style. Considering that the two outer layers of fabric combined were more of a medium weight, that a satin lining was appropriate for the inside of this jacket skirt. When most people are learning to sew, I think that they just sort of default to playing with satin fabric. Satin fabric is kind of like the acrylic paint of fabrics. It's brightly colored, it's solid, it's silky, it looks nice when you're trying to replicate vibrant colors for, a costume. But satin is one of the most difficult fabrics to work with. It's kind of a trap for new designers. My one quick piece of advice is that if you're gonna cut satin, please use the pinking shears. If you use the regular scissors or a blade, they are just going to fray apart in your fingertips while you try to put them back together. I knew that this dress was going to have shoulder pads, so instead of having the interfacing cover the entire inside of the top, I changed it to just basically covering the shoulders and wrapping down the plunging neckline, just to give it a little bit more structure. There are other ways I probably could have achieved that. I just went for sort of a simple variation of what the instructions were already asking me to do. As I carefully pinned the outer layers of fabric together, I could really start to see that nebula print coming to life and, twinkling with that cobalt crepe underneath it. It was really quite fun. Sewing is a long, slow, meditative process that requires an enormous amount of patience and practice. It's kind of like painting a room, where you spend about 90% of the time prepping to paint the room and then 10% of the time actually doing it. Prepping all of these layers of material for sewing took days, and then once they were pinned together, I had to carefully hand baste every piece together, sometimes multiple times before I would reattach them again to ensure that absolutely nothing was shifting while I was moving them around the table. I have had fabric slip through my fingers too many times at the sewing machine to take any chances with this dress, so I truly did baste through every single layer. A little while ago, I designed myself a new garment tag label that is an ivory color with metallic golden thread for the name inside. I love it. I get tremendous satisfaction and have a lot of pride sewing this into the inside of any dress, which I will do by hand. Even though it takes an enormous amount of time to do all of that hand basting before you get to the machine, it does make actually using the sewing machine significantly faster because your pieces are not going to shift at all as you push them through the machine. So for each one, after I had sewn it, I then went back through and very carefully got the satisfaction of pulling out all of my white basting threads. Every single clean seam in a dress like this is something to be tremendously proud of. When I go to iron the sequins, I am very careful that if it is sequins on the outer part that are going to be exposed, that I put a piece of fabric in between my iron and the garment so there's no chance that I will ruin any of the sequins. Been there, done that. Once the lining and the shell of the jacket were attached to each other, I put them both together on the form to get a sense for the weight and how it was going to fall, and compared it side by side to the original mock-up. It's so gratifying even at this stage to see it start to come together. Okay, I can't entirely tell what I'm doing here. I think I am hand sewing the shoulder pads into the top before I attach the lining to the shell of the jacket. So another thing that I learned while being a fashion intern in New York City was getting comfortable working on the floor. Even though there were some tables with all of the interns, we very often ended up working on the floor. And in my case, a lot of the dress panels that I'm using for the skirt tend to be too long for any of the tables around, so it's just easiest to line things up by putting them on the floor. Lots of hand basting. And with any custom gown, there is a good chance that something is going to need to be hand sewn. And on this one, it was that plunging V on the neckline. I had to do all of that by hand. The skirt was a little too heavy to run it through the machine at that point. To finish the hem of that skirt, I think I went around the perimeter of it at least 4 times. Each one took multiple hours of work. And even though no one can necessarily see how clean it is, it certainly makes me feel good to know that it was completely finished. And at this point, the dress is getting pretty heavy with all of the pieces completely attached to each other, and probably the most gratifying part is getting to pull out all of those basting stitches that held the fabric pieces together as I was moving them on the floor. And then the very last piece was a leg slit that I included at Sarah's request. So my back is pretty much done at this point, so here is the final reveal. I am enormously self-critical with my dresses, and I was still so proud of how this dress turned out. I had fun playing with it in the studio, and here it is on Sarah. All the glitz and glamour of old Hollywood, and just a little bit of Guardians of the Galaxy. Sarah looked absolutely incredible. Remember the hidden feature that I told you about in the beginning? This dress contains a hidden pocket to hold a cell phone. Did you get it right? Let me know in the comments.